My name is John Cooley. My early life was spent in Penn, up by the Finger Lakes region, where my father had a successful carriage and wagon business. Very successful. My family, we were firmly against slavery, and we were firmly for a good education, so I heard both sides of the argument as I was growing up. I was in my late teens when I answered an ad for Rifleman Wanted. It was a sharpshooting regiment, so I went and joined. My brother Bruin joined a little bit later, but not right when I joined, because Lincoln needed soldiers. I signed up. We were well trained, and we saw lots of battles, and the costs of our lives as a regiment were very heavy. We started off with 800 in our regiment, and by the time we were disbanded, after battles in the swamps of Richmond and diseases and all, we lost a ton. We disbanded with only 50 men in our regiment out of the 18 that we started. At that time, the War Committee of Yates, which is Ontario and Seneca counties, hired me to do drill for the 148th Regiment Volunteers from Geneva, New York. So I trained them and stayed with them and fought a few years. And, well, they would say I was always where I belonged when the fighting was done. It's a great compliment, I think. I eventually made it up to the rank of major, but before that, I was wounded in the first battle of Cold Harbor. On the third day of the 7 days battle, I was wounded. And then I made it to major as a volunteer officer. And then I left that group, was put in charge of another sharpshooter, from which I finished off the war there. And my brother Bruin, who signed up along in the sharpshooting regiment earlier in the war, spent a few months in Andersonville, the prison camp down south. And we both survived the war, and he died a few years after it because his health wasn't the greatest. But as for me, after the war, Lincoln promoted me up to the regular army of the 13th U.S. Infantry as a second lieutenant. So I served there for about 3 years or so, and then afterwards I resigned from the army, went and became an assistant chief engineer for the Corning and Sodus Bay Railroad, which I spent for about 2 years or so. And then I became an engineer constructor of the Elmira Ithaca Railroad. I started to study law after that, after I was done with the railroads, and eventually I actually got admitted into practice. And then I moved to Angelica, where my brother George and his wife were living, and I lived with them. On October 14th, 1887, in my 40s, I was about 47, I died because of my poor health from the war and other sicknesses and stuff. My story